The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 40.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everybody, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including all the deeper meanings and themes that we can find. Today we're discussing the two newest episodes of the newest season of the Clone Wars by looking at episode 5, Gone with a Trace, and episode 6, Deal No Deal. When I first saw that, I actually thought of the show Deal or No Deal. And
Same.
That's totally beside the point. Joining me on the panel tonight are, first up, Angela Ciolana. Hey, Angela.
I picked Deal.
Second
Wait,
up,
not with the Pikes. No, not with the Pikes. Never mind.
Yeah, please don't. Second up this evening, Mike Creevy. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, Father?
Going pretty well. Third, Thomas Sanjurjo. Well, thanks for covering for me last week, and of course,
no
glad
problem
to have you tonight. And finally, this evening we have a full house. It's Andrew Hermes.
Hey, Father, it's good to be with you again.
Absolutely, it's good to be back with y'all. So these first two episodes of this arc have brought us back to Ahsoka and continuing her story. So I always throw this out to you guys first. What were your impressions of these two episodes? Of course, this is leading into a larger story arc, so we don't have the final conclusion of that yet, but we have the initial. What'd you guys think?
It's pretty clear that these are season 7, where the other two may have been kind of like season 6.5. Because there's definitely a different feel to the animation. There's a different feel to the plot flow and the character development. And, you know, we're back to Ahsoka, which is good. But I definitely felt a big difference between these two episodes and the last two that we saw, or the last 4 that we saw.
Yeah, so supposedly this was one of the arcs that had like one animatic that was done. The story arc was like sort of sketchy. And Ahsoka was supposed to like meet some kind of rogue smuggler type person. I think originally that was a male. So it was very different seeing this sister duo, and I'm still just eating up the animation. I just love it, and I think Dave Filoni was probably just like basking in the glory of like Ahsoka in all of this beautiful animation and cinematic shots and lighting and everything. It was fabulous.
I thought it was like right off the bat to just sort of pick right up with like, and we'll get more into the details, but like if you forgot where things left off with her, which, you know, fans of course didn't, it just brings you right into like, man, things are just not going well for her. Yeah.
You know, like within like the first 10 seconds of it, it's just this really edge of your seat kickoff to the whole thing that's not edge of your seat because it has anything to do with bad guys or like droids. It's just like, man, life is hard. I love that.
Yeah, it was good to see Ahsoka back. But I think as a whole, the two episodes were, I don't know, I wouldn't say they were disappointing. I think they were just fine for me. Because I think they just kind of, they felt a little filler to me at least. And both episodes kind of dealt with Ahsoka like struggling between survival and doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And as well as, you know, the sisters dealing with that as well. So I kind of felt like the two episodes are very similar in themes. I felt like they probably could have just done well with just one of these episodes and then moving on with like the bigger storyline that we see kind of teased at the end of Deal No Deal. But like I said, it's good to see Ahsoka back, and it was that was good enough for me.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I watched the Clone Wars download where they interview some of the cast and crew behind the scenes, and Dave Filoni made the point that these two girls, Trace and Rafa, they're sort of acting like mirrors to Ahsoka of who she could become. Like Rafa is who Ahsoka could become, a more bitter, doing everything that it takes to survive. And Trace is almost like Ahsoka, who's young and naive and idealistic and a bit ambitious. And so after I watched the episodes and I watched the download, and then I went back and rewatched the episodes, and that sort of clued me in a little bit more to focus on what was going on. And I actually got a lot more out of the episodes than I did the first time through. Because the first one is not really high stakes at all. But
just exposition, basically.
Right. And they set up the kind of the characters, the relationships, and the moral dilemma that Ahsoka finds herself in. She wants to do what she knows is right, but how do you weigh that against these two girls who are doing what they feel they need to survive, even though it's not lining up with Ahsoka's morality? And that sort of gets then amplified in that second arc. So the second episode. So I'm very curious to see this play out. I was also very happy to see Kessel. And
it was kind of shocking.
I was.
My kids immediately, as soon as they saw the cloud rings, they're like, "Oh, are they going to Kessel?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm raising Star Wars nerds." That's so good.
Well, and
it's green. It's green.
It was Well, that was initially what surprised me. Yeah, but then it was also pointed out. The fascinating question was this version of Kessel developed, and Solo used it as a reference in developing Solo, or was Solo the reference for the Clone Wars? So I don't know if we'll ever figure that one out.
That's a good question.
But we learned a little bit more about Kessel. So, but we'll get into that more when we get into that second episode. So let's go ahead and jump into the recap here of episode. What are we at? 5. Episode 5. Gone with a Trace. Quite the pun there. The fortune cookie at the beginning is if there is no path before you, create your own, which very well could just relate to Ahsoka now, as she is trying to create her own path in the universe as she has left the Jedi Order behind. We pick up with her, I assume it's quite literally after she walks out of the Jedi Temple and she is left. But she gets on this speeder bike and runs into immediately mechanical issues and malfunctions.
But before that, the shot of her, like the way it pans around and everything, it's so much Anakin that riding that speeder bike off to the Tusken Raiders.
Oh yeah,
that's exactly what I saw of her moving that way, and so it's almost like she's possibly headed off down a dark path. And so that was the setup for me. Where you're talking about like these two characters as a foil for her and what she could be. I was really seeing that in that very beginning moment where it's like, ooh, what's she off to do now?
They definitely left out Duel of the Fates,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and she gets into, a whole world where she could very easily choose to go down that dark path. And if you want to, get, metaphorical, I mean, she falls down the pit, more or less.
Yes.
Right.
Very much so.
Her speeder breaks down and she crashes down this pit, and she manages to catch herself and land on this platform at level 1313, which has particular significance. I think, Thomas.
Yes.
Please.
It was a video game. I wanted it so bad. I wanted it, but it was right before the transition from Lucas to Disney, and it got axed, but it looked so amazing. And when I saw that pit, I was like, no way, they're seriously going to do this. And then they started like referencing it inside the show. I'm like, yes, it's 1313. It had to appear somewhere.
It's also where Ahsoka is hiding I mean, in the timeline, it was very recent that she was there. So I thought that was interesting that they had her going back. But I guess that's sort of like, well, she's still in this dark place. She's still kind of stuck, you know. Personality wise, she is probably just still struggling with the same issue of like, I don't know who I am anymore because the people that I thought I belonged to totally screwed up, and they just ruined what I thought was my whole worldview, my whole understanding of myself. And yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. They went back to 1313 right away.
Well, and that dilemma, that internal dilemma that Ahsoka is going through is captured in the visuals, and there's a point there where she meets Trace, and Trace is fixing this Nebula class starship, and offers Ahsoka a bit of space to fix her speeder bike. But there's a point there where Ahsoka gets irritated and angry and just kind of walks out. And we have that visual of her just kind of standing, looking kind of upwards out of that pit. And nothing is said, but you know that she is struggling with the decision, struggling with who she is and where she's going and all of that. But she kind of has to stay and forms this relationship with Trace. And so they start to have this dialogue back and forth, and Trace kind of is asking Ahsoka where she's from, and she doesn't quite reveal who she is. She just says that she's from the upper levels of Coruscant, and then Trace reveals her own kind of thoughts and feelings on the Jedi, that the Jedi aren't who she thought they would be. They are different from, the stories that she grew up with, and so it's clear that Trace is not a fan of the Jedi. That she sort of blames the Jedi for starting these wars and ignoring the general population and her and all the people that she knows.
I don't know about you guys, by the way, but with that, I had to laugh a little bit because I thought this hasn't happened in a while, just because the circle I'm in, it's kind of known where I stand on like faith and stuff like that. But I thought of some times when like someone didn't know like my Catholic background and they just start like rattling stuff off, and I'm like, well,
actually,
yeah, I'm not gonna really go down that path with you. Or just it's that awkward kind of like I want to push back, but like I'm kind of in their world, and so that was, I think, well written.
I thought about that too. She was like in her bubble. And it's almost like somebody, who's just kind of stuck in the church bubble, and then they step outside. Or, it could be public service. It could be any situation where you're just kind of insulated and you think that you're the greatest thing ever since sliced bread. And then you go out in the real world where people have problems and they don't think you're the greatest thing. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, she's probably like 17 here, I'm thinking. Yeah. So that's pretty young to, be facing those kind of questions and, that kind of scenario.
Well, I feel like she's run into hesitance before from people, but it's always been like them talking to her as a Jedi. Now it's like they don't know who she is. Right. And so like, you're just the assumption, like you're just one of us, normal folk. And like seeing it from that perspective must be really interesting for her.
Well, and Ahsoka may not be quite in the position of being a staunch defender of the Jedi anymore, as she herself has become disillusioned, versus, I mean, as you guys were talking, I have to think of when I go to Comic-Cons and I put on my priest collar. And so I'm not at all hiding the fact of what I am and who I am. But there's all sorts of people that I interact with that are, they're not, I haven't encountered anybody who's hostile, but I've encountered people who don't understand or who are vocal in their own views that are different and contrary to my view as a priest. But I guess I, unlike Ahsoka, have a solid sense of who I am, and I'm not, I mean, I know the humanity of the church, but I'm not disillusioned with God and Jesus, and so I can kind of navigate some of those planes. But Ahsoka is in this position of not even I guess not even knowing where she wants to fit into all of this, and you can even see that she is hesitant to use the Force.
Right.
Almost as a rejection of it. As she left the Jedi Order, it was, kind of leave that part of her behind, but she can't. I mean, that's part of who she is.
Or using the Force is something Jedi do.
Right. Right.
That's gotta be, Oh.
So she doesn't reveal fully to Trace who she is. But this relationship between her and Trace seems to be at the core of what's happening in this story arc. I think anyway. As they're having this conversation, a thug shows up, Pintu, and arrives, and he is demanding money that Trace's older sister Rafa owes him. But because Rafa's not there, he tries to get Trace to pay him, and they both Trace and Pintu make it clear to Ahsoka to stay out of it, but that doesn't actually pan out, which was quite entertaining. Because Trace tries to fight off Pintu and gets overpowered, and then finally asks Ahsoka for help, and Ahsoka just comes in and kicks their tails.
Yeah, my kids immediately picked up on the fact that these were all of her Disney Infinity moves. So the character from Disney Infinity, that's the way she fought, and so they were all like, "Oh, that's just like a." So, yeah.
I couldn't take Pintu seriously because it was Bobby Moynihan, and he in Star Wars Resistance he plays these like really kooky characters, and so. And this character looked pretty funny too. Apparently it was like something that based off of a Ralph McQuarrie drawing. I read that on the episode guide. So that's interesting. But yeah, I couldn't take it seriously.
Well, and I always like anytime anything with him in Star Wars comes up, I think of the SNL skit they did years ago when Force Awakens was coming out, and it was like the toy commercial, and it was for all the kids, and then like all these like 30-something-year-old white guys like just stand behind them, and like, and us too. It's like so awkward. And he's got the Falcon, like, no, it lands like this, So I can't like unhear that. It's so funny.
There was a subtle reference to Anakin as well in that point, because Trace asks Ahsoka who taught her how to fight. And she says, my older brother taught me.
Older
brother, yeah.
So
I got a little emotional on that, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
So then Trace and Ahsoka go meet up with Rafa, and it looked to me like a laundromat.
Yeah. Star Wars laundromat.
So, yeah.
They've got to exist. Right?
Yeah.
We just saw the bathroom thing in Mandalorian finally. So
Yep. Got to clean their clothes, man.
Yeah.
But no zippers.
No.
So Trace confronts Rafa about the money that she owes Pintu, and Rafa says that she has a job that will get them the money, and Rafa is immediately skeptical of Ahsoka when she meets her, and those two continue to kind of butt heads throughout the arc, which I really enjoy, those two interacting with each other.
It's really interesting because Rafa is this person who is, she makes really poor decisions, and yet
she is Han Solo.
And she's very rough around the edges, but she's still likable, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She has totally that quality about her. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought when I saw her. I was like, that's the Han Solo character here. You just take the piloting out and put it in another character. And that's what you have between the two of them.
Well, and I think what makes her likable, at least for me, is that her core value is family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she is doing everything that she's doing to protect her and Trace. And yes, she's choosing wrong, doesn't have the best guidance, and is a bit arrogant. But yeah, she has a love for her sister that I think we can relate to.
She's streetwise, she's got to be confident in what she's doing in order to hustle.
And I don't know if I'm bad for saying this, but I like her haircut.
Dude, her haircut's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it totally fits her.
Both of them have cool haircuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, she also reminds me of, and I think she even quotes a line from Indiana Jones, another Harrison Ford character. I think in Deal No Deal. I think she says she does it for fortune and discovery, something like that. And that's directly from Indiana Jones. So she's taking influence from two big time Harrison Ford characters.
So maybe that's why we like her so much.
Yeah,
could be.
She's a little more enthusiastic than him, but yeah, she doesn't talk like this all the time.
Right. Yeah, she is very expressive. I think they even made a point that she talks a lot with her hands.
Yep.
In the behind the scenes. So yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about the sisters that separates Ahsoka is that Ahsoka's coming from this community of people. Like all the Jedi are a community. So every Jedi knows that every Jedi has a standing. They can talk to each other. They can easily go back and forth with the council. They have standing as a communal group. And she's now on her own. And you have these two sisters that are on their own. And that's the way they make life work, is they are on their own. They owe nothing to no one except for when they are in debt to someone for whatever. But, they are making their own way. And the most important thing is them, just the two people in that agreement.
What's another Solo thing? I'm thinking of Tobias Beckett's big thing, but he's far more self-centered than either of them seems to be, especially once Val's out of this, out of the picture. By the way, if you haven't seen Solo by yet, come on. So, but yeah, that's more of this idea of like, what do you do with what's given to you, which it's very timely for all of us too, I guess.
and both of them, Beckett and Rafa, have that similar attitude that don't rely on anybody. Rafa and Trace have that mantra. And I'm forgetting exactly how they phrase it, but it's to basically only rely on ourselves. And then Trace tries to throw in, and maybe Ahsoka, but even Beckett too, his whole comment, because I was just watching Solo on Sunday to kind of get a feel again for the Kessel stuff, but he even tells Han Solo that, if you act as if everybody's going to betray you, you'll never be disappointed. So again, that whole, that life is very lonely, and as you're trying to be self-sufficient, but it's lonely and miserable. Where Ahsoka,
and you may be protected, in terms of that, but you're also cutting yourself off. It assumes that it's impossible for anyone to not be betraying you,
right?
And you've locked yourself into that.
It's that whole idea that if you guard your heart so much that you don't let anybody in, you'll never be hurt. But you'll also never experience authentic love and relationships. What makes life worth living.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, and Ahsoka might be able to kind of bridge that gap for Trace and Rafa. So at that point, back at the laundromat, Twi'lek walks in and has this deal set up with Rafa to build these 3 droids. And that's where Rafa kind of tells him that the laundromat is just a front for this business, and that her associate is going to build the droids in the back, and they're the best droids ever. And of course, the associate is Trace, and Ahsoka decides to help out. And so they start to get to work on these droids, and Ahsoka is having these difficulties with droids for obvious reasons, the encounters that she's had in the Clone Wars. But she's telling Trace that some droids are just crosswired from the start. And so this was a very interesting exchange because she talks about droids that way, and then Ahsoka makes the comment that she understands a lot about a lot of things, but she doesn't really understand people. And then Trace responds kind of similarly. She says, there are good people, there are bad people, and some are just crosswired like these binary load lifters. And so I had a kind of a couple random thoughts there. First of all was connection to the Mandalorian, IG-11, that whole idea of him being a bounty hunter droid and then being reprogrammed and kind of saves the day. But also just the whole idea that people aren't just crosswired bad. And from a Catholic theological standpoint, every single human person is created in the image and likeness of God and is created good. So nobody is inherently crosswired to be bad from the get-go. And
we never call people evil,
right?
We call their actions evil.
Right.
And so
I thought that was, they're kind of trying to play this out a little bit. These binary load lifters, of course, are not human beings, and if they're programmed to be violent, which we see that play out, then that's their programming. But people are not inherently bad or evil. So as they're building these droids, Ahsoka realizes that this type of droid, this binary load lifter, is a fraud, and that they're actually demolition droids prone to violence. And so, of course, she makes sure that the restraining bolt is on her droid, and of course, the restraining bolt does not get put on to Trace's, and it activates and escapes. So they start the chase, and they chase the droid. He jumps down, a number of levels, and is just breaking things all along the way. And Trace goes and gets the speeder, and Ahsoka goes and gets the tracking device to track it down. And we see that scene kind of play out where they chase the droid, track it down, and the kind of the fight scene with the droid. Trace manages to jump onto the droid and is told to hit the off switch that's on the faceplate.
I was like, why did they put it there? On the face?
Yeah, on the face.
So you can boop the nose. You got to boop the nose. Boop the nose.
It makes for dramatic storytelling.
Where else did you put the off switch? I don't know. Just having an off switch on a droid seems kind of strange in general.
You'd have a remote control. It's like
exactly.
Push the app. But alas, this one is not quite that sophisticated. And Trace does manage to finally hit the off switch as they're hanging on this ledge and about to hurt this child. But the droid falls and Trace is on it, and Ahsoka catches it with the forklift claws of the speeder, and the weight is too much to bear, and the speeder starts to fall over the edge. At which point Ahsoka uses the winch to try to bring it back onto the ledge. And it's at this point that it's still not working, and Ahsoka is forced to use the Force to bring them back to safety. And there was a little Twi'lek kid that saw it and was just so amazed.
I kind of got the impression that maybe nobody knew necessarily. I don't know. She did it very discreetly.
I suspect only that little Twi'lek kid even realized something strange was going on.
I was kind of waiting to see the Twi'lek kid at the end, just force grabbing a broom.
Yeah, I suspect that Ahsoka is very much trying, first of all, to not use the Force, but also, second, I think she's trying to hide her Force abilities. So I think she was very intentional about trying to make that as low-key as possible. And then so they get back to safety, and Ahsoka and Rafa have a confrontation about the droids, and this is where we get into that moral conundrum that Ahsoka is faced with, is that she realizes that these droids would cause all sorts of damage if they're delivered, but Rafa wants to keep the deal and exchange the droids for the money that she was promised for the survival of her and her sister. And Ahsoka tries to get her to reconsider that. And kind of at the end, Rafa just says that she'll do the right thing, which apparently means charging the Twi'lek double rather than
more money.
Right. But that reveals a little bit of Rafa's morality. I mean, she is doing what she thinks is best for her and her sister, without necessarily thinking about the larger picture or what's going to happen to this. She's concerned with the immediate survival of her and her sister and paying off Pintu with these credits. And that particular episode then ends kind of with Trace and Ahsoka going back to finish working on Ahsoka's speeder.
I love the way the next episode opens with them talking about the names of the ships and the speeder.
Yes. Yeah, so to kind of jump into that, unless was there anything else that anybody wanted to mention about that first episode before we continue?
Just to redeem The Last Jedi a little bit. Yeah, like in the behind the scenes little download episode that they had on StarWars.com, they talked about how the speeder sound for Ahsoka's junkie speeder just wasn't quite right. And then the sound editor remembered that The Last Jedi had these little skimmer rinky-dink ships, and they sounded like jalopies. And so she took that sound and mixed it with the normal speeder sounds, and that's how they created Ahsoka's speeder sounds. I thought that was pretty neat, and Last Jedi is helpful.
You know, I've softened about The Last Jedi the more it ages.
I'm the same way. I'm not as I haven't watched it again, but I'm just like, it's like mellowing on me.
Yeah, I think Rise of Skywalker helped mellow Last Jedi.
Yeah. For the record, I said that tongue in cheek because I like all the movies. I'm not prejudiced.
Okay, well, to jump into then the next episode entitled Deal No Deal, not Deal or No Deal, but Deal No Deal. It starts with the fortune cookie saying, mistakes are valuable lessons often learned too late. And that, I think, comes into play quite heavily in the back end of this episode. So we'll get to that. But yeah, it starts off, Thomas, like you mentioned, that they're finishing these repairs on the Nebula class ship, but also the speeder bike, and Trace calls her ship the Silver Angel, and then wants to know the name of her speeder bike.
I love they will not let her. They will not let her forget that.
But it's so true.
It's funny though, because the naming schemes on ships are really, really important, and it's interesting because you don't hear names like that for ships in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
And, another franchise that has really unique, amazing naming schemes is the Halo franchise, and their naming schemes for their ships are just absolutely stunning, and they make the ships sound huge and important and awesome. And in Star Wars, everything sounds very like, I don't know, futuristic, not fantasy. Mm-hmm. The closest you get to is the Millennium Falcon, but it's still the Millennium Falcon, and so it's got this very like forward-thinking, progressive thing. And there's something about Silver Angel that's just very,
whimsical.
Yeah, and old world shippy kind of, like, the Age of Sail, and it's just really weird to have. I don't know why it doesn't fit, but it doesn't fit. They're absolutely right. It just doesn't fit as a name for a ship.
Well, the name Angel, as someone named Angela, is very, like, it's an innocent sort of word. And I think it goes well with Trace's character being sort of naive and innocent in a way. She's not really exposed to, obviously they have a hard life, but she herself hasn't had to deal with a lot of that stuff. And she's very idealistic. So I think it goes well with her character and kind of shows sort of, her personality as well.
Yeah. I was also really happy to see her stick with it. Like, everybody's critiquing it, Ahsoka and Rafa, and she's just going full tilt with it. So they're fixing the ship, and Ahsoka and Trace are kind of just talking about things, and we get another reference to Anakin. Trace asks Ahsoka where she learned all this and what academy she went to, and she calls it Skywalker Academy. So another little emotional moment there. At that point, Rafa comes in and tells Trace that she needs her for a job, and that the pilot she had originally hired backed out, and so she needs Trace. And so there's a bit of a Trace is a little bit offended that she was asked not first. She is way overconfident in her piloting abilities. I don't know if she's ever flown really before.
No, I think they say she hasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So
like I felt like I was in there with them and I was in danger.
I know, right? You're like, why is anyone getting back on this ship? What are you doing?
And that tells you, like, they're like going back to their perspective of the Jedi, like being like their whole thing is like the Jedi have never helped them out, and is totally different than what Ahsoka might have thought before. But it's also interesting that they really haven't been away from 1313. This and you see that because obviously she can't fly well and she hasn't flown before. Yes, I think that also allows Ahsoka to kind of realize that, oh yeah, these people only know, what they know. They only know like this way of life because they haven't seen what else is out there, in this expansive, universe. So it just reveals a lot more about these characters.
Well, and Rafa knows quite a bit more, but she only really lets Trace know certain things, or they don't realize that the Pikes or at least Trace doesn't realize that the Pikes are this intergalactic crime syndicate, and she just assumes they're thugs, ordinary thugs, And so they're really getting Trace is really getting an eye opener with this whole mission. Rafa is again suspicious of Ahsoka. She confronts her and again this reveals Rafa's whole personality and attitude, but she assumes Ahsoka has an ulterior motive, and she makes a comment that everybody has an angle, and everybody has kind of what their own motives, and Ahsoka just kind of says that she's there to help them, and Rafa doesn't quite buy that, but she lets her come along. And at that point, then they depart from the underworld and immediately head into the military lane, and have this comical exchange happening with Yularen, and but a really cool moment there with Anakin and Ahsoka as well, because Yularen is going to send he's going to send pilots out to arrest them, and it's Anakin with his force connection to Ahsoka that they sense each other, that he tells Yularen to let him go, which was really cool to see.
Yeah, that was pretty touching, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, even their facial expressions, I mean, just showed their own depth of feelings for each other as they had that moment.
Well, and it's a little, again, like we were talking in the last episode about just certain things about Anakin that evoke, for whatever reason, something from the original trilogy. And I couldn't help but get a little bit of, I mean, it's not evil, but it's the same guy, and he's on the deck of a Star Destroyer, and there's someone out there he's close to, and he's like, where is that shuttle going? It's the same kind of,
right.
Just give him 20 some years. But that was just something about that imagery. I'm sure they thought of that, but that really jumped out at me.
They then finally get out into hyperspace, and Trace forgets to release the air brakes. Again, it makes me laugh, but it just again shows her lack of experience. But it's funny because I think probably, I don't know if you guys have been there, but I've been there, where like, especially if I don't drive stick shifts, but but I remember trying to drive stick shift, back on the family ranch at one point, and forgetting to unlock the emergency brake, or, killing the engine or whatever. So like, it's totally relatable.
And imagine a teenager doing that who's never driven before, and you're going to, I don't know, do a drug deal.
You're going to Kessel Run. You're going on the Kessel Run. It's the Kessel Run,
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it was also pointed out, and I forget who I was reading about this, but that fortune at the beginning of the episode, that mistakes are valuable lessons often learned too late, that they were pointing out all the mistakes that Trace was making that weren't causing any sort of major issues. So this was like one of the mistakes that she made, or one of the other one was getting into the military lane, that she keeps making these mistakes without having any serious consequences. And the mistake that she makes, that it's too late, is, at the end getting captured, and they have to deal with not getting captured. It's the dumping the spice is the mistake that is finally, the one that she's made, that she didn't learn the lesson beforehand, and it's too late. So that was kind of an interesting thing to kind of weave through the episode. So they do finally get into hyperspace and release the air brakes, and they arrive at Kessel, and Ahsoka is immediately suspicious. She knows what Kessel is known for. It's known for, its spice, and Rafa tells her that they're picking up medicine. And then we see them land in this lush, beautiful paradise on Kessel. which did not at all click in my mind whatsoever.
Yeah, that was weird.
Well, supposedly, according to, I don't know if this was StarWars.com is where I got this, but the northern hemisphere was left to the Pikes to do their mining of the planet, and then the southern hemisphere was what we saw, which was lush and green, and that was what the royal family kind of cultivated, whereas they just let the Pikes kind of do their thing in the northern hemisphere. So that's what I learned from this episode.
It's canon for sure. I really just had to sit with it because I'm so used to the Legends material, which puts Kessel as like this rocky, barren world. And then I was okay with what they did to it in Solo, like, you know, creating the spice mines and the coaxial or whatever that hyperspace fuel was, you know. But then to see this like lush, beautiful paradise, I was like, that is so not what I was expecting. But yeah, it is part of the canon of Star Wars about the planet. So, which makes Ahsoka's comment a little bit later when they finally head to the spice mines. She says, "Now this looks like the Kessel from the stories," and I was like, "Yes."
You're right.
So
yeah, that shot was just so stark, and it was funny because it was pretty quick too. It was just like, that's where we're at. Got it.
Now, and I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Dominican Republic, but it's kind of it's kind of depressing, like flying along the border between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, because you see exactly that. You see this gorgeous, lush, beautiful green side of the island, and then there is a very clear delineation of what the border between the two countries is, and on the other side is just desolation. It's just stark, it's bleak, there's no trees, there's nothing, and it just stops dead at the border between the two countries. So to me, that's what this was, is like seeing, you know, this divide on the planet where everybody's kind of living in, on one side is living in this almost fantasy land that just ignores the other side. Just don't pay attention to that other side over there. They've got their own problems, let them deal with it, we're fine over here. It's
a very Star Wars theme. You know, the reminds me of The Last Jedi, actually.
I think she planned this.
I totally didn't. But it's really fun to troll. So yeah.
Yeah. So they land in this lush, beautiful paradise and are met by Kinesh Locke. He is he's King Yaruba's major domo. So I guess his representative, the king's representative to meet Rafa and negotiate this deal. And they are brought into this supreme and superb banquet, at which point they're all kind of sitting around the table, and you see Rafa, Trace, and Ahsoka all, again, they're kind of in their own little elements there. Rafa wants to meet the king, and Trace is so concerned about letting the representative know that they have the fastest ship around. Like, she just has that, again, that childlike innocence and naivete, and she's so excited because she gets to fly her ship without knowing at all, really, you know, the consequence of what's going on and the spice and all of that. And Ahsoka is clued in on the quote unquote medicine that they're delivering. Kinesh he tells them that it's the essence of the medicine that they're going to be transporting, 3 containers of unrefined spice. And Ahsoka, of course, knows that unrefined spice can be made into, you know, the recreational drug, which is probably what it's going to be used for, but it can be used for things that are not so good. And as they are then leaving to go to the spice mines to pick up the spice, Ahsoka comments to Rafa that this plan, this running the spice, could get them attacked, and Rafa thinks that they'll be safe because they're smaller than the normal transports, and so they will be overlooked by the pirates and the people who would be looking to get this easy score. And then Ahsoka and Trace talk a little bit about the mission as well, and Trace fully trusts Rafa, and she says that she tells Ahsoka that she knows that Rafa is just looking out for her, and assumes that if Rafa has asked her to do this, then she believes that she can, and she's gonna do it. And then they finally get to the spice mines of Kessel, the Kessel from the stories, which I was way more on board with.
I was interested in that moment where they talk about the divide between seeing all the droids and then realizing that they're slaves. That was really because we're getting into this point in Star Wars where we're talking so much about droids and their own autonomy and how that fits into everything that's working in the Star Wars galaxy. And so it seemed like it was almost like it's fine as long as that's just a whole bunch of droids. But then as soon as we talk about it being slaves, it's like, oh, that's different. But then you take a step back and think, well, what are the droids doing then? Really?
Well, and Star Wars is, it has a way of humanizing droids too.
Especially L3. No. Well, I couldn't help but think just with them being there, it's a little funny though to see like all the stuff going on there and just imagining how just chaotic that scene's going to be. But because I think this is give or take 10, 11 years before Solo. I was looking at the timeline. Something like that.
Right, yeah.
Because it's Solo's kind of like halfway between, 3 and 4, I guess. Give or take. So, which is also kind of fun with Ahsoka, just to kind of, all the Pike Syndicate stuff. It made me think, like, I wonder, I don't know if it would be just, if it would fit or not, but I couldn't help but think, like, it'd be kind of cool if there was a way to kind of, I don't know, get Dryden Voss or like Tobias Beckett or some of those people. If we're going into some of this, underworld stuff, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Might be kind of cool, but we'll have to see.
There was all sorts of connections to Solo, so we'll see. We've got at least probably 2 more episodes of this arc, probably. So they land, they load the spice from Kessel. And then when they're in hyperspace heading to Obadiah to meet with the Pike crime boss Marg Krim. I'm so glad I wrote these down because they are so difficult to keep track of. Ahsoka and Rafa have this ethical debate about the spice. Ahsoka points out that the Pikes are, these intergalactic crime. It's an intergalactic crime syndicate, and that they will take everything from them, and they probably won't even get paid. They're not just, your run-of-the-mill local gangsters. And so Ahsoka is trying to convince Rafa to deliver the spice to someone who could actually use it for medicine, because she assumes that the Pikes are going to use it for recreational drugs. And we again run up into that Rafa needs to deliver the spice to get the money to pay off the debts that she owes and to help her and her sister survive. And so she's adamant that she is going to deliver, and Ahsoka, wants to do what she feels is right. And Trace doesn't want anybody to take her ship and dumps the spice mid-flight and tells them both, neither of you get your way.
My jaw dropped when she did that.
Yeah.
I actually wondered how that was even possible in hyperspace to do that and not the ship off course. But yeah, it was definitely an unexpected plot development, because now they're put in a position where they owe the intergalactic crime syndicate money and they have no spice to deliver. They can't even choose to deliver it and turn it into medicine. I mean, they're really just in a really tight spot. And Ahsoka comes up with a plan for dealing with this, and she suggests that she has a trick or two that might help them out. Hint, 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 hint. Force use, maybe.
We all knew what was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We knew. They didn't. So they land, and Rafa lies to the Pikes and says that they had no problem transporting the spice, and the Pikes want to check the cargo, and Ahsoka uses the Force persuade to get him to give them the credits and send them on their way. At which point, one of the other Pikes calls it highly irregular and goes to check the cargo anyway, and very quickly realizes that there is no spice. And they call patrol ships, and they use a tractor beam, and the episode sort of ends with Rafa vowing to blame all of this on Ahsoka when she's interrogated, and they're all surrounded at that point.
I have a Force question. Have we ever seen a Jedi use the mind trick on more than one person at a time?
Very first time we saw it used. Obi-Wan, he seems to use it on all of the troopers that are asking them questions.
I was wondering if that was the case.
Right. Rey used
for that
it on,
particular
on
situation.
2 guys in Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
Which is still I think that's still my favorite one though, because they're so dumb. They're just like so happy to see you guys.
The Daniel Craig stormtrooper.
It's true. Yeah, that's true.
No, the 2 in Rise of Skywalker. I think it's I forget who. I think it's like Harry Styles and somebody else.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just so quick, but it's just a riot. And then that's Poe's like, does she do that to us? Just like he doesn't know. Yeah, maybe.
So yeah, I was wondering why didn't she do that on all of them? But maybe it was just her youth or inexperience.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It could be that particular Pike was just resistant to it too, because you know I think we tend to take for granted that it's going to work.
Right.
And I think the Jedi do too. The Jedi take for granted that it's going to work, but it failed for Qui-Gon when he was talking to Watto. Watto's like, mind tricks don't work on me, just money. And so that's I think that there are some, and that might have been the case with this particular character as well. Like I'm not gonna take your suggestibility. I want to see proof that this thing that we're relying on happening did actually happen.
I suspect Ahsoka's going to have to reveal her Jedi past to Rafa and Trace here pretty quickly
to get them out of whatever mess they're in.
Yeah. But I think it's going to cause some problems because Trace and Rafa are not a fan of the Jedi, and so I think that's where this is going. It'll be fun to see this kind of play out and how Ahsoka deals with it.
And I do wonder if there is more there, that meets the eye. Is like a little more specific reason why they don't like them, rather than just maybe the general perception of them as not all that great. So I don't know.
Right. I think that first episode, Trace just mentions that she's under the impression the Jedi started the war, and that
right,
and that they're ignoring the little people, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
you also have this pair of sisters who seem to be scrapping to get by, and you wonder what happened to their parents, that they've been doing this long enough, and so that there might be something to that not only did the Jedi start the war, but the war killed our parents, and so that could be more of a deeper tale to it.
Well, and we do know that at least according to Trace, I think that their parents split. So, but we don't really know context or anything other than that. Because Trace mentions that's how they inherited the hangar that they have. We might get some more answers there. So, any final thoughts before we kind of bring this Nebula-class Silver Angel in for a landing?
It was just nice to see Ahsoka again.
Yes.
Yeah, and she's definitely grown up since the last time that we saw her too. I think like even though this is picking up on the tail end of where she last was, you see a more mature version of her in this. But it's also really interesting to watch her following the Jedi way of staying out of it, like being there, being present, but staying on the sidelines. And so you see throughout both of these episodes, she's not the main character. The sisters are the main characters, and she's just kind of there to ground the story back into the Star Wars, into the Clone Wars universe.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things about Ahsoka for me, is that she is trying to trot a middle path that she has no particular guide. She almost has to use the Force as her guide in a way, and also her own conscience and what she's been brought up in. And so I've always been curious, because we've seen the young Ahsoka, and in Rebels we saw the older Ahsoka, and she was so wise. And I always wondered ever since then, how did she get to that point? just, meditating by herself. It must have been some kind of life experiences and, those type of things. So I'm really fascinated to continue this journey with her.
Yeah, and you see the real difference between her and Anakin in that way is where Anakin would just force his will and try to take over a situation. Ahsoka just tries to, like you said, just kind of the Jedi way, do it from the sidelines and find that middle path. And yeah, she struggles with it sometimes, obviously, for dramatic effect.
Well, because she went to the Academy of Skywalker, right? That's
yeah, exactly. Skywalker Academy.
How
right.
could you not struggle?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But naturally, but yeah, I think you're starting to see, like, the more she matures, the bigger sort of difference between her and Anakin as characters.
I don't really have anything else to add, so I think we'll bring this in for a landing. That's it then from us. So listeners, what did you think of these episodes of the Clone Wars? Definitely be sure to let us know. You can email us or comment on our Facebook or Twitter page to let us know. And our email is starwars@sqpn.com. And you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and on Twitter at SQPN. So now we'd, of course, like to take a moment and thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Wars, including Patricia R., Ron S., Ryan W., Marion M., and Lisa R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Wars and all the various shows that we make here at StarQuest. And if you'd like to join them, you can do so by visiting sqpn.com/give. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also subscribe going to the SQPN YouTube channel and clicking that little bell to get notifications. You can find any previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars by going to sqpn.com/Star Wars. And we will be back in 2 weeks when we will be reviewing episodes 7 and 8 of Season 7 of The Clone Wars, the continuation of this story arc with Ahsoka. So definitely be sure to tune into Disney Plus, watch those episodes, and listen to us in a couple weeks. So until then, Angela, Cialana, thanks for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars this evening.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thomas and Herho, thanks for joining us this evening.
Nice to be here.
Mike Creevy, good to have you on board this evening.
Always a lot of fun.
And Andrew Hermes, always a pleasure to have you with us as well.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.